This is part 3 of an 18-week series called Journey to Marvel's Infinity War. Each week in 2018, I'm going to re-review one movie in the MCU in release order leading up to Infinity War. So we've already talked about Iron Man. Last week we talked about the Incredible Hulk. And today we are talking about Iron Man 2. So here's what this is going to look like. I'm going to kick it off with a quick retrospective, a little behind the scenes on how it was made. Then I'm going to give my review and analysis of the movie. I'm going to talk about its place in the MCU. I'm going to share my kind of final thoughts and score on the movie. I'm going to share some of you guys' thoughts on the movie. And then I'm going to do a giveaway at the very end of this video. But before I get started, go ahead and tell me your thoughts down below in the comments section. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Kind of where do you place it amongst the MCU movies, and has your kind of thoughts on it changed as time has passed? With all that said, let's go ahead and get started. After the immediate positive response to Iron Man, Marvel Studios were quick to start preparation for Iron Man 2. Negotiations to bring Jon Favreau back as director took several months, as Favreau believed the movie needed a 3-year production, but Marvel was insistent on only 2 years. Eventually, Favreau signed on to direct again with Marvel's shorter production schedule. Negotiations to bring back Terrence Howard fell through. Howard publicly suggested that Marvel refused to pay him his contractually obligated amount and instead implied they gave his money to Robert Downey Jr. In the end, his character was recast with Don Cheadle. Upon release, Iron Man 2 was an instant hit, making even more money than the first film. While not as well received by critics as the original film, it still has a fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes with 73%. So there's a little background on the movie. It's interesting that it has a 73% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it did great at the box office, but as time has passed, it feels like the reputation of this one has soured quite a bit, and I'm going to talk about that good bit in my review. With that said, let's go ahead and get started talking about the good. And the biggest positive about this movie is that it is more Iron Man. And what I mean by that is Jon Favreau and Robert Downey Jr. have just crafted a world here that we like to be in and like to be around these characters. Tony Stark's interactions with everyone are pretty amazing. And whether he's in Senate committees, whether he's talking with Pepper, wherever he's interacting, there's a certain likability to it. Just the scenarios, seeing Iron Man mow down drones, that's fun to watch. And this movie gives us more of what we liked from the first movie. Now, is it well constructed? We'll talk about all that in a little bit, but it gives us more of it. And I think that's why when the movie first came out, it was a little bit better received because it does give us what we wanted in that he's mowing more bad guys down. There's more quips. There's more of the sarcasm. There's more of him outsmarting people. All that stuff we want, we get more of it here. It's a world we like to be in. Even like his workspace as he's doing the holographic things and processing through things. We like to see all of that. We like to see the Easter eggs as Nick Fury shows up. And so we get to spend time in this world that we thoroughly enjoy without it doing anything to just screw everything up. Where, perhaps in a later Iron Man movie, there's some twists that just anger the audience quite a bit. There's nothing like that in this movie. It's just more time in a world that we enjoy with characters that we like, that are played by great actors, that are all very charming. Beyond that, there's some great action sequences in here. Like when Black Widow just starts like tearing guys apart in the hallway and flipping all around and spinning all over around him, where you got Happy Hogan like boxing with the guy. That's a great Hulk sequence. That is a very cool fight sequence because it's got the humor of Happy struggling with one guy and all the elements of that. Great sequence. Seeing Iron Man and War Machine tear down drones, that's amazing. Like, that's just like one of those scenes like, yes, finally we're getting it. And just even like the part with like even the way it's shot where the sweepingness of it is they're just mowing guys down. Amazing. The race car sequence where Whiplash shows up, very cool special effects, and you get the new tech of Iron Man having his suit in a briefcase. I don't know how the physics of an Iron Man suit being something that you can carry with one hand, I don't know how that works, but hey, it's cool to see in a movie, and if we can do holographic 3D stuff too, let's not worry about the weight of an Iron Man suit in a briefcase. So those are the big things that come to mind as the positives. The problem is that's kind of where the positives end. essentially the positives are, hey, it's more Iron Man, what I started with. So let's move on to the mixed. And the big mixed here, I think, would probably be the two villains on this one. So Justin Hammer, for me, I like Sam Rockwell's performance here, and especially I like the concept of the jealous other inventor guy out there. I've heard a lot of people, though, have been very negative on the nature of Justin Hammer and Sam Rockwell's performance in this movie. And it's a little bit too over the top. It's a little bit too overcooked, per se. Likewise with Mickey Rourke, the character seems underwritten. It doesn't give us a lot for Mickey to really work with. But just as this quirky guy that has his bird out for revenge, I think it works in as what it's supposed to be. It's underwritten, which we'll get into that in just a little bit. But as for his performance, I didn't mind it so much. I've heard other people just felt like he was phoning it in, just kind of, my bird, and mumbling stuff like that, which I can see where some people would be coming from on those ones. So specifically the performances of the villains seem where there's some mixed opinions on it, and I can see where they're coming from. They're certainly not immediate, obvious, knock it out of the park, great performances. I think there's a certain charm in there, especially in Justin Hammer's back and forth with Tony and his jealousy. That there's a lot of, I like that part of it. With that said, let's move on to the bad. And unfortunately on this movie, there's a lot of bad on this one. And the big problem here is there's way too much of everything. I mean, just way too many plot lines. I started writing them down, the number of plot lines in this movie. You got Whiplash's revenge, Tony's public persona, Tony's blood toxicity issues, Tony's relationship with his father, Tony's relationship with the government and them trying to take the suit, Justin Hammer's jealousy, Tony's alcoholism, Pepper Potts is made the CEO, introduction of Black Widow, Rhodes becomes War Machine, Hammer hires Whiplash to get revenge on Tony, Nick Fury comes in because he's concerned over Tony. 12 different plot lines in a movie, and that's a lot. And so when you watch the movie, that's like the first 30 minutes, it's just each scene sets up a new plot line and a new plot line and a new plot line. And then we have to put a bunch on the back burner while we move and we start talking about these other plot lines. And because of that, we don't feel connected to any one of them long enough to care about it. Or we spend a whole long time on Tony and his dad in the middle act and Tony and his blood toxicity stuff, which is the least interesting thing about this movie. Like that you forget, oh yeah, a major plot line in this movie is Tony's blood has metal fragments in it, and it like drives the plot of this movie, and it's so forgettable because we don't really care because it's just separate from Whiplash and Justin Hammer. And we spend 20 minutes on it in the middle of the movie. And all the while we're spending 20 minutes while he's researching stuff from his dad's work and watching old family videos. You've just got Mickey Rourke over here in the background working in a lab. And the plot lines, like they're separate from each other entirely for the whole middle of the movie. So you spend the first 30 minutes of the movie setting everything up. We have one sequence where our stories kind of come together, and then they split up again, and then they only come back together in the third act of the movie. That's not good. And that's I think where this movie is just a big jumbled mess, is that, as I mentioned in the background, Jon Favreau wanted 3 years to make the movie, and Marvel said, no, you got 2 years. We got to get it out in 2 years, almost certainly because they were moving towards Avengers. They had Thor, they had Captain America. So they knew when they wanted it to be, and they knew they wanted to put these different Avengers setup pieces in there. In this movie, you can feel the growing pains of the MCU as they were learning to incorporate different things, how much time they need to make a good movie. And we could deal with the plot being a bit of a mess, but what they did with the plot as well causes problems. The first part is Tony Stark himself. So Tony, by his nature, is kind of a douchebag. And we can forgive that when he's heroic and he's channeling it in the right direction. But in this movie, because of the blood toxicity, he thinks he's dying. He's having this crisis of personality and all this stuff. Because of that, he's leaning into his worst characteristics, in which case you have things like the party scene where he's just so selfish, so self-destructive, and making such bad choices, we can't really root for him. And we're not really rooting for Rhodey either to take the suit to give it to the government because we know the government's bad. And so we're just watching the movie being like, I'm struggling to know who to root for right now because Tony's not being a he's not on a positive arc right now for so much of the movie, which makes him very unpleasant, and some of that charisma starts to fade away quite a bit. So that's problem number one with the story, is that we can't really root for Tony too much in it. And problem number two with the story is that because of the nature of these different storylines all over the place and the nature of the villains themselves, the story has no imminent danger to it. There's no sense of urgency of a coming attack that has Tony on the edge, like, I need to solve a problem. No, Tony's arc throughout the movie for himself is, I have metal in my blood and I need to get the toxicity out of it. That's what he's doing throughout the movie. And so he thinks he's going to die. And so he's just partying. And then he gets some new information, does some research, and he's working to solve that. That's what he's doing. But the actual action base, the stuff that we like watch the movie for, the big action sequences, it's some stuff's just happening. Then Whiplash shows up 30 minutes into it and there's an action sequence. Then we think he's gone and we think he's blown up because his death is faked. And then it's not that Justin Hammer's making an army to attack anything. Justin Hammer's just trying to embarrass Tony Stark. And we don't know what Whiplash is doing with his other stuff. So we're going through the movie with no sense of, oh no, they're going to blow up the world. Oh no, Justin Hammer's going to... No, we just know that there's bad guys in it. We know Tony has a heart metal in his blood thing going on, but there's no like big catastrophe that we're moving forward. So there's just kind of scene after scene happening and we're going, okay, I like being here. It is more Iron Man. No sense of urgency, no imminent danger, no tension. Because to have tension, there has to be stakes. There has to be a threat that we care about, that we think is actually going to overcome our villains. Blood toxicity doesn't feel like it. Justin Hammer embarrassing Tony Stark, not going to happen. Whiplash having a secret plan that he's not telling us doesn't work. And so what ends up happening is we have a movie. It only has 3 action sequences. Maybe I feel like I'm missing something, but you've got the car race scene. You've got War Machine and Iron Man at the party. And then you have the third act. Only 3. So there's not even a lot of action in the movie. And I guess there's the escape sequence, but that's not an Iron Man sequence. So there is a little bit more action in some of these other types of things. But then we get our final act, which has some great action in there. But once again, it doesn't feel, it's not like Whiplash is trying to kill everybody. No, he's just kind of a bad guy that wants to get Iron Man or sort. So like, you don't even feel like the stakes of it, like people are dying or you care about anything happening. It's just cool action. It is cool to look at. And then of course we have the final third act where Whiplash shows up in yet another big suit, swinging, except with whips on it. So all in all, a movie that's very, very poorly constructed. Like the cast, like the characters, like the world that we're in. A very poorly constructed film that doesn't come together very well at all and doesn't age well, because that sense of, hey, we got more Iron Man. Well, we've got a lot more Iron Man now, and better Iron Man with Avengers movies and Civil War, another Iron Man movie, well, Spider-Man Homecoming. This movie's just kind of there, and you'd rather watch any of the other Iron Man. The novelty of more Iron Man disappears as time passes. Thus, this movie has not aged well at all. With that said, let's start talking about the MCU connections on this one. And there's, of course, a lot of connections in here. Stating the obvious, we've got the introduction of Black Widow and the largest role of Nick Fury as of yet. As we start talking about S.H.I.E.L.D. and how they are not particularly interested in bringing on Iron Man right now because of his bad decision-making. And so, likewise, in this, we learned that Howard Stark was one of the people that started S.H.I.E.L.D. So we start to understand, like, the world building in this. It's been around a long time. Other people have been involved leading up to this point in time. It's not like Iron Man came out of the blue and suddenly they're superheroes and so S.H.I.E.L.D. had to form. No, it goes back a long way, and we learn about that kind of first in this movie where we understand the scope of the world going on, that his dad was a part of this, and all the kind of the different intricacies to all these different things. In this movie, we learned Agent Coulson is heading off to New Mexico, and this is the feed into Thor, the next movie, the one we'll be talking about next week. I think the most interesting aspect where this one ties into the MCU isn't the most obvious one, but it's probably the most important one, which is Tony Stark's connection to feelings towards the government and regulations. So in this movie, the big gigantic start of it is, no, I don't need to be regulated. It's mine. It's not yours. And him battling them trying to get the Iron Man weapon. He goes, no, I am Iron Man. You can't regulate me. It's my body. It's my... He's doing all that fun stuff. And then as time passes and Ultron happens and even Iron Man 3 happens, by the time we get to Civil War, his mind is radically changed as he's seen that he is his own worst enemy and he's the one that can cause destruction throughout all this. He cannot be trusted, and therefore things should change because of that. That's kind of one of the things that I think one of the key elements of this movie that's really important is his mindset earlier on. Some other little nuggets in there. The talk about the Stark Expo, I wonder if this is kind of an allusion to kind of some of the stuff that we see in Captain America the First Avenger. And then likewise, speaking of Captain America the First Avenger, we see Howard Stark in there, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. And Tony Stark has a Captain America partially constructed shield that he uses to prop up his laser gun to create his new element in this movie. So several different kind of connections in this one that are... fun little nuggets in there. Overall, I think I'm going to go a C+ on this movie. There's just too many story issues, but it is pretty enjoyable, so I would give it a 7 out of 10 on the entertainment scale. There's enjoyment to be had. It is watchable, construction-wise, mess of a film. So anyway, that's my take on it. That's where I landed on. Here's what some of you guys had to say about Iron Man 2.
I don't think this is a terrible movie at all, but it's definitely a big step down from the first Iron Man.
And this one just seemed off. The comedy wasn't really there.
I think it's my least favorite of the Iron Man.
This movie was actually one of the movies that I actually liked as a sequel.
Whiplash was cool. Nothing else was. The villain is also a throwaway villain.
And Mickey Rourke is one of the worst, if not the worst, Marvel villain.
It's not top 10 MCU movie at all.
It's probably the weakest out of the 3 Iron Man movies, but...
Maybe a little bit disappointing in comparison to the first Iron Man film, but in my eyes, a lot better than the third.
The plot line is very thin. It's definitely a setup movie. So Iron Man 2 for me is one of the most underrated films in the MCU. It's one of my favorites, actually.
I had a lot of fun with Iron Man 2. I recommend it, man. Great movie.
So there you have it. It's a movie that's got its fan. It's also got an awful lot of critics. Told you guys I was going to do a giveaway on my Iron Man 2 video, and here we are. I've got a whole bunch of names in this hat to do a giveaway. Let's see who today's winner is going to be. We've got Adrian Grimsmo.
Iron Man 2. Now, I think this movie gets a lot more hate than it actually deserves, but I still think it's pretty fun and enjoyable to watch. But I do still think it's one of the worst of the MCU.
So if you can comment down below, tell me where I can email you or on Facebook, something like that, and give you the digital code for whichever movie you would select. I'm also going to do a giveaway upcoming this week on Fantastic Four, my ranking video for that, and in a couple of weeks, my ranking of the Maze Runner movies. So check those out. And if you want more description or instructions on how to get involved in these giveaways, you can see it up here in this video up above. All of it involves recording reactions using the Stardust app. You can download it totally free in the Apple or Android store at that link down below. Once you download the app, follow me first. My name's like right there in that little bar right there. And essentially what it is it's an app where you can record reactions and reviews that are just 30 seconds long for the movies and TV shows you watch. So like I'll just be at work in my work truck and I'll be like, hey, and shoot a quick review real quick of whatever I watched the night before. So it doesn't have all the slickness to it. All the personality comes out just right there on the spot, and you don't need all this fancy equipment. So if you want to kind of join in these giveaways, be featured in a future video, or see just some of my additional review stuffs on there, download it down at that link below. Follow me. When you shoot reactions, go ahead and tag me in it in the top right-hand corner so it shows up in my notifications so I can see your pretty face on there. And it's that simple. And if you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I do movie reviews, TV reviews, ranking videos, but the key thing is I don't want to just talk about movies. I want to talk about movies with you. So join me in the comment section and tell me about Iron Man 2. Also, download that Stardust app so I can see you on Stardust. And as always, thank you for watching.